The alien girl moved through the ruined station like a whisper that did not believe in its own existence. Her body wrapped in a field of refracted light that bent vision and sound. A gift of her bloodline and a curse she had learned to rely on, because in this galaxy survival belonged to those who were unseen, and she had survived too long to believe in miracles anymore. Every step careful, every breath shallow, her heart beating with the quiet panic of someone who knew the law had already sentenced her long before she was born. She was a princess once, not by crown or ceremony, but by genetic decree, a living key encoded into her cells, the last legal heir of a shattered alien house erased by interstellar law after a war they were never meant to win. The galaxy called it order, balance, justice. She called it extinction, because laws written by victors do not care about children hiding in the dark. She believed she was invisible, not just to eyes but to fate itself, because the cloaking field around her skin had fooled scanners, soldiers, drones, bounty hunters. It had saved her from cages and laboratories, from execution warrants stamped with official seals, and each narrow escape hardened her belief that as long as she stayed quiet, as long as she did not matter, the universe would eventually forget her. But the universe never forgets, it only waits. The station trembled softly as distant battle vibrations passed through dead metal. Echoes of a war she wanted no part of. Human warships clashing with alien fleets far beyond this forgotten orbit. She had chosen this place because no one fought over trash and ruins, because no one looked for royalty among broken corridors and frozen airlocks, because invisibility felt safest where nothing else wanted to exist. Then the human arrived. He did not burst in with heroics or noise. There was no dramatic entrance, no flashing armor lights, just the sound of careful boots against metal, slow and deliberate. The sound of someone trained not to be noticed, and for the first time in years her breath caught, not because she feared him, but because something deeper twisted inside her chest, something instinctive and ancient, a warning she could not explain. The human soldier moved like someone who had learned how to survive alone. His armor scarred and dulled from too many battles to count, his visor cracked at the edge. His rifle held low but ready, not aggressive, not careless, just present. And as he passed through the corridor, her field bent light around her, wrapped her in safety. She pressed herself against the cold wall, willing herself to become nothing. He stopped. The silence stretched, thick and dangerous. Her pulse thundered in her ears as fear crawled up her spine. She told herself it was coincidence. Humans stopped all the time, checked corners, adjusted gear, talked to themselves. She had watched enough soldiers die to know their habits. She waited for him to move on. He did not. Instead, his head tilted slightly, visor turning toward her empty space, and her blood ran cold, not because he pointed a weapon, but because his posture changed, subtle but unmistakable. The stance of someone who had just noticed something that should not be there. Her mind screamed to run, to flee deeper into the station, to trust the invisibility that had saved her life so many times before. But her body betrayed her, frozen by the impossible truth forming in her thoughts. He cannot see me. No one can see me. The law itself could not see her. Scanners had failed. Psionic sweeps had passed through her like fog. Yet the human stood there, unmoving, watching nothing with the focus of a predator. Slowly, carefully, he spoke, his voice calm but edged with something raw and human. Something that did not belong in official reports or military briefings. "I know you are there," he said softly, and the words felt heavier than any weapon. Her field flickered. Just for a moment, just enough. Their eyes met. The shock of it struck them both like a physical blow, her alien gaze wide and luminous, filled with terror and defiance and centuries of inherited grief. His human eyes steady behind the visor, not cruel, not triumphant, but stunned, as if the universe had just revealed a secret it had never intended him to find. She expected fear or greed, or the cold calculation of someone who understood the value of what she was. She expected the words arrest, bounty, protocol, law, but none of those came. Instead, his breathing hitched slightly, a human reaction she felt more than saw, and something unspoken passed between them. A shared understanding that this moment mattered more than orders. "You should not exist," he whispered, not as a threat but as disbelief, and her chest tightened painfully, because she had heard those words before, spoken by judges and admirals and scientists, always before something terrible happened. She took a step back, hands raised, claws trembling, ready to vanish again, and finally the soldier moved, lowering his weapon completely. A gesture so small yet so powerful it cracked something inside her that had been sealed for years. "I am not here for you," he said, choosing each word carefully, like someone walking across thin ice. "I was sent to check the station, nothing more." She searched his face for lies, for hunger, for the shadow of law behind his eyes, but found only conflict, duty warring with something deeper, something human. The station shuddered again, this time harder, alarms screaming faintly in the distance. A reminder that the battle outside was drawing closer, that time was running out, and she realized with sudden clarity that being seen was more dangerous than being hunted, because now fate knew where she was, and fate had human eyes. The alarms echoed through the ruined station like distant screams, metallic and distorted, shaking dust from ceilings that had not been disturbed in decades, and the alien princess felt the old instinct surge inside her again, the need to disappear, to dissolve back into invisibility before the universe remembered its hatred. Yet the human soldier still stood there, watching her as if the chaos outside had faded into irrelevance. She tightened the cloaking field around her skin, light bending, edges blurring, her outline dissolving into the air, and the relief was instant and hollow at the same time, because she knew now that invisibility was no longer safety, it was merely delay. The soldier had seen her once, and that meant the galaxy could see her again. He did not reach for his weapon, did not call out to command, did not even move closer. Instead he exhaled slowly, the sound loud in the sudden quiet between alarm pulses, and she realized with a strange jolt that he was giving her space, a courtesy she had not been offered since childhood. "I will turn around," he said quietly, eyes already shifting away. "If you want to leave, you should do it now." The words struck her harder than threats ever could, because mercy from a human soldier made no sense in a galaxy where humans were rising fast and feared faster, where their warships cut through alien fleets with ruthless efficiency. She had heard stories whispered among refugees of human law, of human stubbornness, of humans who refused to accept the universe as it was handed to them. She hesitated, torn between instinct and something dangerously close to hope, her mind racing through outcomes. If she ran, she might survive another day. If she stayed, she might doom herself to chains or worse. Yet her feet refused to move, held in place by a question she had never been brave enough to ask anyone. "Why?" she said, her voice barely more than breath, distorted by the fading field. "Why did you not raise your weapon?" The soldier stiffened slightly, as if the question had pierced armor no plasma ever had. He turned his head just enough to show he was listening, not looking, respecting a boundary she had not known she needed. "Because I have seen what happens when soldiers follow law without thought," he answered after a pause. "And because you looked more afraid than dangerous." Her throat tightened, memories surfacing unbidden. Her homeworld burning under sanctioned bombardment. Judges declaring her bloodline illegal. Her parents standing between her and soldiers who claimed obedience as virtue. Fear had been her constant companion. Not weakness, but survival. The station rocked again, closer now, a deep vibration that rattled her bones. Human and alien fleets were closing in, and she knew the law would follow the battle like scavengers, recording, cataloging, sentencing. If she was found here, the verdict would be immediate and final. She let the cloaking field fall completely, stepping into view once more, a deliberate act that felt like stepping into fire. Her skin shimmered faintly under the dim emergency lights, eyes reflecting ancient stars and unshed tears. "If you are not here for me," she said, "then you should leave before your presence condemns us both." He turned fully then, meeting her gaze without flinching, and she saw the war in his eyes, duty etched deep by training, compassion burned in by experience. His hand hovered near his communicator, the link that connected him to fleets and commanders and the machinery of law. "If I leave," he said slowly, "someone else will come, someone who will not hesitate." The truth of it settled between them like a shared wound. She had survived because of timing, because of luck, because of cracks in systems too large to care about individuals, but luck was thinning, and timing was no longer on her side. "What are you, human?" she asked, not by species but by role, by purpose. "A soldier," he replied, and then after a beat, "a human." The simplicity of it shook her more than titles ever had. Because humans, she was learning, carried contradictions like weapons, mercy alongside violence, empathy alongside firepower. The alarms shifted tone, sharper now, urgent, incoming signatures detected, and he glanced toward the corridor leading to the docking ring. calculating distances, time, outcomes. "There is a human warship in low orbit," he said quietly, not broadcasting, not officially here. "If command discovers you, they will invoke interstellar law. I will be ordered to detain you." Her heart sank, the words law and order echoing with old pain. And yet something in his voice held another meaning, unspoken but heavy. "And if they do not discover me?" she asked. He met her eyes again, and this time there was no hesitation. "Then you are a ghost the universe failed to erase." Outside, the battle roared closer, energy discharges lighting the void beyond broken viewports, fate tightening its grip around the forgotten station. And in that fragile space between soldier and princess, she felt destiny shift, not because of prophecy or power, but because a human had chosen to see her. And seeing, she realized, was the most dangerous act of all. The station groaned like a wounded creature as another shockwave rippled through its frame, lights flickering between red and shadow, and the alien princess felt the ancient instincts of her kind stir beneath her skin. Instincts older than the laws that hunted her, older than the wars that had erased her name from star charts. She could feel the battle outside not as sound but as pressure, as if the universe itself was leaning closer to listen. The human soldier moved with quiet urgency now, checking angles, scanning corridors without pointing his weapon at her. A deliberate choice she noticed with sharp clarity, every motion measured, every step controlled. Yet his presence filled the narrow passage like gravity, impossible to ignore once felt. "They are sweeping the sector," he said, voice low, "human ships and allied patrols. This station will not stay forgotten for long." Her fingers curled slightly, claws catching faint light. "Allied," she repeated softly. The word tasted bitter. Alliances written by survivors, not by the dead. Her people had been allies once too, until the war turned and their existence became inconvenient. She drifted closer to the wall, not to hide but to steady herself. The stone cold against her palm grounding her thoughts. "You should not involve yourself," she said. "The law does not forgive witnesses, and it never spares humans who disobey." He glanced at her, something unreadable flickering across his face. "The law already knows my name," he replied. "It carved it into me the day I enlisted." The admission unsettled her, because it carried the weight of sacrifice without pride. She had expected arrogance or certainty, not this quiet acceptance of cost. For a moment they stood in shared silence, alarms pulsing like a heartbeat between them, and she studied him the way her tutors once taught her to study threats, noticing details others ignored, the slight tremor in his left hand that spoke of old injuries, the way his shoulders bore invisible weight, the human smell of metal and heat and something softer beneath, resolve perhaps. "You are different from the others," she said finally, and then shook her head. "No, you are not different, you are human, and that is what frightens me." He did not argue. "Humans tend to frighten people," he said quietly. "Sometimes we frighten ourselves." The station shook harder, a distant explosion tearing through the silence, and fragments of debris rained down the corridor. The sound sharp and final. Her breath caught as a memory surged through her. A council chamber collapsing, her mother pushing her toward a hidden passage, her father standing tall as soldiers flooded the room, telling her to run, always to run. She closed her eyes briefly, steadying herself. "My blood is not just royal," she said, the words heavy with secrecy. "It is encoded. The law calls me a living violation, a destabilizing element. My existence alone is considered an act of war." His gaze sharpened, this time truly seeing the weight behind her form. Not just a frightened girl but a symbol, a catalyst, something powerful enough to threaten systems built on control. "That is why you hide," he said. "That is why they hunt," she answered. The mystery of her deepened, layers of meaning unfolding like a star map she had never shared with anyone outside her bloodline. She felt exposed yet strangely lighter, as if speaking the truth reduced its hold over her. "The human ship in orbit," she continued, "if it scans deeply enough, it will see me. Your technology is too advanced, too curious." He nodded slowly, already thinking. "Then they will not scan deeply, not officially." The implication lingered, dangerous and enticing. Unofficial actions were the birthplace of legends and disasters alike, and she felt the tension coil tighter around her heart. "Why would you risk this?" she asked, voice trembling despite her effort to stay calm. "You owe me nothing. I am not your princess, not your ally, not your mission." He hesitated, And in that pause she sensed the truth struggling to surface. Because sometimes humans acted not from orders but from stories they told themselves, of who they were and who they refused to become. Because I was taught that seeing injustice and doing nothing makes you part of it, he said at last. And because when I saw you, I did not see a threat. I saw someone the universe had decided to erase. Her chest ached at the words, a sensation she had nearly forgotten, being acknowledged without being condemned. It was dangerous, intoxicating, and terrifying all at once. The alarms spiked suddenly, proximity alerts blaring, and his communicator crackled to life, distorted voices bleeding through static, reporting debris, signatures, possible survivors, search teams mobilizing. Time is gone, he said, tension sharpening his voice. They will be here within minutes. She looked at him then, truly looked, at the human who stood between her and a galaxy that wanted her erased, and felt the weight of destiny pressing down. Not as prophecy but as choice. If they find me, she said softly, they will not stop with me. My bloodline carries codes that can awaken fleets, shatter treaties, unmake laws. His jaw tightened, understanding the scale of what stood before him. Then we make sure they do not find you, he replied. Outside, the battle raged closer. Inside the station secrets pulsed like a second heart. And the alien princess realized that invisibility had never been her true shield. Being seen by the right human was the corridor filled with the distant thunder of approaching boots, vibrations carried through metal and bone alike, and the alien princess felt the future closing in with every heartbeat. Her senses sharp with the knowledge that the next choice would not be reversible. The human soldier stood still for a breath, then moved with sudden purpose, sealing a blast door with a manual override that screamed in protest as ancient systems woke unwillingly. Search teams are splitting, he said, voice tight, they will sweep this ring first. Her cloaking field flickered instinctively, fear urging her to vanish, but she forced it down. Invisibility was no longer escape. It was a lie she had outgrown. If they scan aggressively, it will not matter, she replied. My blood will sing to their sensors. He nodded once, accepting the truth without argument, then reached to his chest plate and deactivated his external recorder, the tiny light dying like a star, and for the first time she saw something shift completely in him, a line crossed that could never be uncrossed. What are you doing? She asked, dread and awe tangling in her voice. Choosing, he answered simply. The station lights dimmed further as emergency power rerouted, shadows deepening until the world narrowed to the space between them, and he stepped closer, lowering his voice to a whisper meant only for her. There is a way to hide you, but it breaks protocol so badly they will never write it down. Her pulse spiked. Tell me. He removed his helmet slowly, deliberately, exposing a human face marked by scars and exhaustion and something softer beneath, trust or maybe defiance. Humans had learned to fear her kind. Yet here he was stripping away armor in a war zone, an act so reckless it felt ceremonial. Human law has a clause, he said, obscure and ancient, a relic from first contact wars. It allows a soldier to declare personal custodianship over a non-human entity under imminent unlawful eradication. It suspends immediate enforcement until tribunal review. Her breath caught, custodianship, ownership dressed as protection. My people were enslaved once under similar words, she said, her voice sharp. I know, he replied without flinching, which is why no one uses it anymore, because the cost is severe. What cost? She demanded. He met her gaze steadily. If I invoke it, I become responsible for you under human law, your safety, your actions, your existence. If you are judged illegal, the punishment falls on me as well. The twist of it struck her hard. The law that hunted her could be turned into a shield, but only if a human was willing to stand beneath it with her, sacrifice himself to slow the machinery of extinction. It was madness, it was hope, it was terrifying. They are almost here, he continued, and if I do nothing, you die or disappear into a black site no one will ever admit exists. Her mind raced, centuries of inherited caution screaming warnings. Yet something deeper rose to meet it, something royal not in blood but in will. If you do this, she said slowly, you tie your fate to mine. He gave a faint, crooked smile. Fate has been trying to kill me for years. Maybe it is time I chose it back. The blast door shook violently as voices echoed from the other side. Search teams coordinating. Scanners warming up. The universe knocking impatiently. She stepped closer to him, eyes blazing with resolve and sorrow. Intertwined, there is something you must know before you choose, she said. My bloodline does not just threaten law, it activates something older, something buried beneath treaties and truces. A human warship in this system is not here by chance. His expression shifted, a soldier recognizing the shape of a revelation. Continue. Your warship, she whispered. It was built with stolen designs from my people. Human engineers did not know what they copied. Only that it worked. My presence will awaken it. The words landed like a silent explosion. Awakening, he repeated. Yes, she said, voice steady now. If I step aboard a human vessel, ancient failsafes will trigger, recognition protocols, authority layers that even your admirals cannot override. The ship will respond to me. His breath slowed, the implications unfurling rapidly. That would make you more than a refugee, more than a survivor. It would make me a key, she finished, to fleets, to weapons, to truths the galaxy buried. That is why my house was erased, because law cannot control what it cannot own. The blast door alarms screamed as cutting tools engaged. Seconds remaining. Red light flooding the corridor like blood. He looked at her then. Really looked, not at a hunted princess but at the fulcrum of history. And the choice before him sharpened into something terrifyingly clear. Invoke custodianship and the law bends. Take her aboard and the warship awakens. Do nothing and the galaxy stays comfortable in its injustice. He raised his wrist and activated his communicator, broadcasting on an open channel that every human ship in range would hear. His voice steady despite the chaos. This is Sergeant Elias Kane, he said, invoking personal custodianship under Article 7, subsection Black. Non-human entity under my protection effective immediately. The corridor fell deathly quiet for half a heartbeat, then erupted in confused shouts beyond the door. Command demanding clarification, threats, orders. He turned back to her, eyes fierce and calm all at once. The twist now irreversible. Welcome to human law, princess. The blast door buckled inward, metal screaming, and as soldiers poured through the smoke she felt it, deep within her blood. A distant answer stirring in the void. The warship had heard her call. The blast door finally tore inward with a shriek of tortured metal, smoke flooding the corridor as human soldiers spilled through in practiced formation. Weapons raised, visors glowing, voices overlapping with confusion and authority. And the alien princess felt the weight of a galaxy crash down on her shoulders all at once. Because this was no longer a hidden moment between two souls. This was history stepping into the light. Sergeant Elias Kane did not step aside. He moved forward, placing his body between her and the barrels of their rifles. His presence a living declaration, and the tension snapped tight enough to break stars. Stand down. He ordered, voice cutting through the noise with command hardened by battle. Custodianship is invalid. One of the officers barked back. You are exceeding your authority. Negative, Kane replied evenly. Article 7 Black is still active under emergency extinction clauses. Any action taken against my ward is a violation of human law. Her ward, the words echoed in her mind, heavy and dangerous, and yet she felt no chains in them. Only risk, only sacrifice. The soldiers hesitated, weapons wavering. Because human law was a maze, even they feared to enter blindly. Behind them, the void beyond shattered viewports lit up with sudden brilliance. A deep harmonic pulse rippling through space like a cosmic heartbeat. And the princess gasped as ancient recognition surged through her blood. Stronger now, clearer. No longer a whisper but a command awakening something vast. The warship had fully responded. Across the system, human vessels faltered mid-maneuver. Command bridges erupted in alarms not meant to exist. Symbols flooding screens that no living engineer had programmed. Recognition hierarchies activating. Ancient protocols unfolding layer by layer. And admirals stared in disbelief as a single ship shifted status from asset to authority. On the flagship, a voice emerged from nowhere and everywhere, calm and impossibly old, addressing no one and everyone at once. Royal genetic signature confirmed. Custodial authority acknowledged. Conflict parameters reassessing. The galaxy noticed. Alien fleets paused their advance, sensors flaring as power signatures spiked beyond known thresholds. Treaties flickered into irrelevance as ancient systems stirred. Governments that had erased her house felt the tremor of something they thought buried forever, and fear spread faster than any fleet. Back in the station, the soldiers froze as their comms crackled with fragmented orders. Contradictory commands cascading down the chain. Detain the asset. Protect the ward, withdraw immediately, hold position, confusion fracturing discipline. The princess stepped forward then, heart racing but spine straight, centuries of silenced lineage rising in her posture. Stop, she said, her voice carrying not force but certainty. You do not want to fire. One soldier flinched, not from threat but from the strange resonance in her words. Scanners screaming warnings as her presence destabilized local systems. Lights flickering wildly. Kane glanced back at her, eyes wide with understanding and alarm. What is happening? He asked quietly. The law you built on our bones is collapsing. She answered softly. My existence was never just a crime. It was a countdown. Outside, space twisted as the awakened warship moved without thrust, without inertia, repositioning itself between fleets like a judgment made manifest. Weapons powering up that defied current physics. Ancient designs married to human ingenuity, unstoppable and undeniable. Galactic channels exploded with panic. Emergency summits called mid-battle. Alien councils screaming for ceasefires. Human command struggling to reassert control over a ship that no longer answered to rank alone. In a distant chamber light years away, an alien high judge whispered her name for the first time in generations, realizing too late that erasing a bloodline did not erase its keys. Back in the corridor, Kane felt the ground shift beneath his feet as history realigned. This will start a war, someone shouted. No, she replied, meeting Kane's gaze with fierce honesty. It will end one and begin another. The soldiers slowly lowered their weapons, not in surrender but in awe, instincts screaming that firing now would do more than just a mission. It would ignite something no fleet could contain. Kane stepped closer to her, voice low. The galaxy will come for you now. Not as a ghost, but as a symbol. She nodded, eyes burning with resolve and sorrow intertwined. They always were. They just pretended not to see. The station shook violently as evacuation orders rang out across all channels. Fleets disengaging, realigning around the awakened warship like planets around a sun. Power rewriting politics in real time. She turned toward the viewport, feeling the ancient ship's attention like a living thing, waiting, recognizing, calling her home to a place she had never been allowed to stand openly. If I leave this station, she said quietly, there is no going back to shadows. Kane did not hesitate. Then we faced the light. As they moved toward the docking ring, alarms screaming and the galaxy holding its breath, the princess understood the true cost of being seen. She was no longer running from the law. The law was running from her. The docking ring trembled as if it could feel what was approaching, metal groaning under forces it was never designed to welcome, and the alien princess walked beside the human soldier through corridors washed in red light and shadow. Every step pulling her farther from the life of hiding and closer to a destiny that felt impossibly heavy and strangely right. Outside the viewport, the awakened warship waited, vast and silent, its hull alive with patterns that responded to her presence like a sleeping giant opening one eye, and she felt it in her blood, a resonance that hummed through her bones and into her heart, recognition layered upon recognition, past answering present. Human command channels screamed with overlapping orders, retreat vectors, containment protocols, emergency legal overrides. Yet none of it touched the ship anymore. It existed beyond rank and fear, beyond treaties written in the aftermath of genocide, and Kane felt the truth settle into him with bone-deep clarity. Whatever happened next would not be undone. You still have time to walk away, he said quietly as they reached the airlock, his voice steady but strained. If you leave me here, I can tell them you escaped. They will bury the truth under reports and silence. She turned to face him, eyes luminous with emotion she no longer tried to hide. You would be destroyed by your own law, she said softly but firmly, and you know they would never forgive you for seeing me. He met her gaze, the weight of his choice etched into every line of his face. I saw you the moment you were real to me, he replied. Everything after that was just honesty catching up. The airlock doors slid open with a low thunder, revealing the warship's inner hull, architecture unlike anything human or alien textbooks had prepared him for. Ancient curves fused seamlessly with modern steel, as if two civilizations had reached across time to finish each other's sentences. She stepped forward first, breath catching as the deck beneath her feet pulsed with light, systems activating in her wake, pathways illuminating like constellations. And a voice filled the chamber, no longer distant, no longer abstract, but present and attentive. Royal authority confirmed. The voice intoned, "Heir of the erased house, welcome home." Tears welled in her eyes, not from triumph but from grief. Home was a word she had not dared to claim. And yet here it was, spoken without judgment, without fear. Cain followed her inside, the doors sealing behind them with finality, and instantly his armor chimed warnings: foreign authority detected, command access limited. Yet beneath the alarms he felt something else, acceptance, as if the ship itself had weighed him and found him worthy enough to stand beside her. Across the galaxy, reactions spiraled into chaos. Alien worlds mobilized defenses. Human admirals argued over jurisdiction and survival. Ancient enemies sensed opportunity while old allies felt betrayal, and everywhere the same question burned: who controls the future now? The princess placed her hand against a glowing console, and memories not her own flooded through her. Visions of councils that once dreamed of balance rather than domination, of ships built not to conquer but to deter annihilation, of laws meant to protect the small against the vast, before fear twisted them into tools of erasure. They killed my people because they were afraid of what we could stop, she whispered, voice trembling with restrained fury. And they rewrote the law so fear would always win. Cain stepped closer, placing his hand over hers, grounding her in the present. Then let us change what the law remembers, he said, not as command but as promise. The ship responded, power levels rising, channels opening across every known network. A broadcast prepared not as threat but as declaration, and she felt the weight of it settle onto her shoulders, not as burden alone, but as purpose. If I speak now, she said softly, there will be no turning back. They will call me conqueror, destroyer, queen, monster. He looked at her with unwavering certainty. They will call you what they fear, but they will hear you, and for the first time in centuries, the erased will be heard. Outside, fleets repositioned nervously, weapons tracking the warship, fingers hovering over triggers that could ignite the stars, and time stretched thin as a blade. She straightened, royal not by title but by resolve, and nodded once. The broadcast surged outward, carried on frequencies old and new, piercing shields and propaganda alike, and her voice followed, steady and clear, carrying grief, truth, and unyielding strength. This is the air you tried to erase, she began, and the galaxy listened, not because she threatened them, but because she had survived them. And beside her stood a human soldier who had chosen to see her, knowing the climax had arrived, and destiny would not look away. Silence spread across the galaxy in the wake of her words, not the silence of surrender or fear alone, but the heavy stillness that follows truth when it finally has nowhere left to hide. Fleets that moments ago had been poised for destruction now drifted in uncertain formation. Commanders frozen between orders written long ago and a future unfolding without permission. The alien princess stood at the heart of the awakened warship, her voice still echoing through systems that once refused to acknowledge her existence, and she felt the weight of countless lives pressing gently against her awareness. Refugees hiding in forgotten systems, species living under laws designed to keep them small, histories erased so thoroughly that even grief had learned to whisper. She did not raise her voice again. She did not threaten. She did not demand. Instead she waited, because destiny was not something to be forced. It was something that revealed itself once fear loosened its grip. Responses began to arrive, fractured at first, an alien convoy standing down its weapons, a human task force disengaging shields, emergency councils forming mid-orbit as leaders realized the balance of power had shifted not through conquest but through recognition. Cain stood beside her, armor silent now, eyes fixed on the star-filled void beyond the viewport. He felt smaller than he ever had and stronger all at once. A single soldier whose choice had bent the path of empires. He knew there would be consequences, courts, inquiries, accusations, but none of that mattered in this moment, because for the first time his service meant something more than survival. You did it, he said softly, awe and relief threading his voice. She shook her head gently, eyes bright with unshed tears. We did it, because I could not have stood here alone. The law would have crushed me again if you had not stood in its way. The ship pulsed warmly beneath their feet, ancient and alive, as if approving of the bond forged in defiance and trust. Custodial bond acknowledged. The voice intoned, joint authority established. Joint authority, Kane repeated quietly. A human and an alien princess, bound not by chains but by choice. Across the galaxy, a vote was called that had not been written into any charter, whether to continue a war that now lacked moral ground, or to accept that the erased had returned not for revenge but for reckoning. One by one fleets powered down weapons, not out of obedience but out of understanding that firing now would shatter more than hulls. It would shatter the illusion that injustice was stable. In a distant chamber, the same alien judge who once whispered her name now spoke it aloud, formally, restoring what had been stripped away. Not because law had grown kind, but because it had grown afraid of being wrong. The princess felt the ship's awareness expand, doors opening not just within metal corridors but within possibility itself, archives unlocking, truths long buried ready to surface. She saw futures branching outward, some bright, some dark, all fragile. "I do not want a throne," she said quietly, as if confessing to the stars. "I do not want conquest or worship." Kane looked at her. "Then tell them what you want." She took a breath, steadying herself. "I want a galaxy where children are not hunted for what they might become, where law protects life instead of erasing it, where invisibility is not the price of survival." The ship carried her words farther than weapons ever could, and something shifted irreversibly. Alliances redefined themselves. Old enemies hesitated. New paths emerged where none had been allowed before. Time passed strangely after that, hours or seconds. It no longer mattered. Evacuation vessels departed the ruined station, leaving behind a place that would be remembered not for its decay but for the moment history changed direction within its walls. Kane finally removed his helmet again. Breathing freely, "You know they will call you dangerous forever," he said gently. She smiled, not with bitterness but with quiet strength. "They always did. But now they will also call me visible." The warship adjusted its course, not toward battle, but toward the heart of known space. A living symbol moving openly at last, and as it did, she felt the presence of her lost people not as ghosts but as legacy, carried forward through her choices. She looked at the human soldier who had seen her when the universe refused to, and placed her hand over his heart. "Thank you for choosing to look." He covered her hand with his own, voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for letting me." As stars stretched into motion around them, destiny settled into something quieter and deeper than prophecy. A shared path forged not by fate alone but by courage, empathy, and the simple act of seeing another being as real. The alien girl who once believed she was invisible now stood at the center of a galaxy that could no longer look away. And the human who saw everything learned that sometimes the greatest rescue was not pulling someone from the shadows, but standing beside them when the light finally came.